Good morning, Florida lacrosse fans. Lee Roggenberg, Morning Coffee. It's going to be a little bit different edition of Morning Coffee today. Hope you bear with it a little bit. We'll speak a little bit more off the top of the head and a little bit less on statistics and things like that. It's not going to be a day that we're going to talk about college results over the weekend or upcoming honors or anything along those lines, but really more about the last, say, 3.5 days since Friday afternoon. And this is going to be dedicated to the St. Edwards and Lake Highland game last night, but we're not going to spend that much time actually talking about the game. We've seen over these last 3.5 days the best of life and the worst of life. Worst is obviously what happened to the young man, Badensky Termidor of St. Edwards, who had tragically lost his life in an annual celebration that's supposed to be joyous of the St. Edwards seniors finally moving on to their college choices. The tradition was a walk through the school in front of other students, and eventually a dip into the lagoon behind the school, which took a tragic turn. We don't have to I don't have to get too heavily detailed. Most of you, I'm sure, have read what we posted on the event itself. But what I want to do is I want to kind of talk a little bit about the events that led up to last night's game and how the game itself fit into those last couple of days. The sport of lacrosse is special since its inception, which some historians peg as far back as 1,000 years. No matter when it started, the underlying reason for playing was to honor the creator who gave the Native Americans the game. It was supposed to be used over the years for many purposes, amongst them healing. Healing is a process that isn't instantaneous. And we certainly saw over the last couple of days how that process worked out, how well it worked out, and how so many people stepped up and showed us the best of what we can be. The word honor isn't used enough in society. It's got many different definitions, and we all pretty much have a pretty good idea of what the main ones are. And this sport is supposed to have an awful lot of honor throughout as it's played, as it's used. It's not appreciated enough. But then you see events of the last couple of days and you realize it's certainly there under the surface, ready to be released when it's most appropriate. Healing was certainly needed for the St. Edwards community. One of the more interesting things I saw written, the TC Palm article that we linked to, has a columnist named Larry Reisman, whose kids graduated from St. Ed's. And I think he mentioned in his article the last time he wrote an article from the school was when his oldest son went through the same ritual, the senior celebration, and how now he can't look at it the same way. And I certainly understand that. Now, before we get much further, I want to say something to the Lake Island prep kids. We at FLN covered the first games of the Stoneman Douglas boys and girls after they came back to play from the shootings at the school. The boys playing Cardinal Gibbons, the girls playing West Boca. Through no fault of your own, you became the other team last night. Not the Lake Highlands that we've known over the years about the incredible lacrosse success in the past. One of the standards that all of us in the state looked up to. You were put in a position that, frankly, is a hell of a lot harder. It's pretty hard for mature adults to handle. But you were put in it as high school kids. And many of you, as those who know the roster know, ninth graders, you were thrown something that is pretty darn tough for kids to deal with. You did the right thing. You gave your fellow lacrosse players at St. Edward's the time to grieve and the time to make the decision whether they wanted to take back to the field to play you. When the whistle blew last night, you played your hearts out. You fell shy by one goal in overtime. You honored the sport. You honored yourselves. You honored your school. The loss you will eventually recover from. No problem. The accolade will never go away. It's pretty rare today that there is a story with no villains. Our social media celebrates gotcha. It celebrates online bullying by those who claim to fight it. It thrives on tearing down. And it markets pointing fingers. Pretty similar to what our media has become to. Everyone involved here showed their best. A horrible accident claims a young man that by all accounts was popular of his peers and an enormous academic success story. A young man who was going to go on to college on an academic scholarship. The absolute best of what this country can produce. Everyone stepped up, whether it was Lake Highlands, whether it was the Florida High School Athletic Association, which many of you know I criticize at times. The FHSAA allowed the time to give the school the chance to decide whether they wanted to play. They didn't go buy a book that maybe would have required a forfeit. Congratulations to them for doing what they did. And the St. Edward's community, the decision was left in the hands of the St. Edward kids to decide what to play. No one else. On Sunday, they gathered and they voted. Take a lesson from that. All of you helicopter parents. We used to have a saying in this country about kids will rise to the expectations placed on them when they are allowed to do so. And they did. Big time. They took on the responsibility by voting on Sunday to go ahead and play the game. Win or lose, they took on that responsibility. They honored their friend on Monday and showed they also understood what honoring the sport was about. The game itself was pretty much exactly what the creator intended. A war of attrition, mental toughness by both sides. The weather, as most of us know, took a turn for much warmer. And we've had a relatively cool spring. Players were not used to playing in hotter weather, artificial turf. We all know how hot the artificial surface can get when it heats up. You could see it. When I was watching from the game, I mean, you could see it. Kids were fatigued all over the place. They had to fight through both sides. The result itself, to me, is almost secondary. Even though it's the importance of playing for a Final Four berth is difficult, we'll look back and realize that winning the game, although great for St. Edwards, will take a back step to how they honored their friend. We'll link the TC Palm article and what likely is Orlando media coverage of the game too. You can read the recaps there. I've seen the TC Palm one. It's detailed. Orlando has a tendency to do that pretty well too. It's not so much the goal scorers, although, to be honest, if we didn't have the backdrop of this, of these last 3 days, Liam Murphy's game and goal for St. Edwards was truly remarkable. 17 saves by my count, and believe it or not, 2 goals, end-to-end rushes, 2 goals, one of which was very close to being the game winner, coming late in the fourth quarter. Ricky Savage scored the overtime winner. There's plenty of clips of it. Just go to our Twitter feed or plenty of other Twitter feeds and see. It was a remarkable game on its own. The Brevard Sports Network did a great job covering it on their Facebook Live page. The sport was honored yesterday. Bidensky, Termidor, rest in peace. Your spirit guided 2 great groups of kids to produce something special last night. Thank you. Okay, this is Lee Roggenberg, Florida Lacrosse News, saying so long.